Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I am bringing you my May reading wrap up. Before I get into these mini reviews of the books that I read in May, I did just want to take some time to acknowledge everything that's going on in the world right now and how important it is that we are supporting the Black Lives Movement, not only right now where it's at the forefront of a lot of our focuses, but in the future, in a week's time, in a month's time, in years' time, that we are still giving our attention to the Black Lives Matter movement. I had some videos scheduled to go up in the past few days and over the weekend, and I decided to unschedule them because it just felt weird uploading those videos that I had filmed a couple of weeks ago where I was all peppy and not acknowledging what is going on. I'm going to leave some links down below in the description to places where you can donate, to petitions you can sign, to a playlist of Black booktubers, and to a Twitter thread of some Black owned businesses that you can support in the UK. The majority of viewers to this channel are from the UK, but also a lot of these businesses will deliver to Ireland and throughout Europe as well. As ever, all of the books that I've mentioned will be linked down below in the description if you want to find out more about them or buy yourself a copy. I would highly encourage you to purchase these books from an independent bookstore if you possibly can, or get them from your library. But if you would like to purchase them through the links I've got in the description, they are affiliate links, and I will be donating all of the money that I receive through those affiliate links to good causes that are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. The books I read this month quite neatly divide themselves into books for younger readers and books for adults. So I'm going to start with the books for the younger readers, beginning with Julian is a Mermaid by Jessica Love. You may have seen a video I uploaded a few weeks ago where my friend Vic chose my book haul for me, and this is one of the books that she picked out. This was a book that I'd already read, so this month it was a reread for me, but I'm so glad to now have a physical copy of this book because it is one of my favourite children's picture books of all time. This is about a young boy exploring their gender identity. While they are on public transport with their abuela, they spot some beautifully dressed individuals. You can discern from context that they are drag queens, even though it's not explicitly spelled out or anything. And Julian is just captivated by how they are dressed, and it encourages them to explore their own gender identity in a way that is really creative and celebratory. The art style in this book is just absolutely stunning, and if you are into kids picture books, this is just one of my absolute favourites. I also read You Must Be Leila by Yasmin Abdel Majid. This is a middle grade book that follows Leila when she goes to a new school for the first time. Her family are Sudanese and this book is set in Australia. In this school, Leila sticks out a lot because she doesn't quite know how to conduct herself in this new situation. A lot of people are very unfairly judgmental of her, and she is the first person to have gone to this school that wears a headscarf. She experiences a lot of racism in this book, but Leila always manages to fight back, and she is a really inspirational young woman, and not just because of how she stands up against the prejudice that she faces, but because of her insistence that she compete in a big robotics competition that there is in her school. Most people compete in this in teams and they've been planning for months, but Leila's really kind of just winging it, and I related to that, and I think it's so important to have young female characters that are involved in STEM subjects. My main criticism of this book is that I'm not entirely sure how much time the author has spent with kids who are meant to be the same age as Leila. I do remember finding out how old they are, and I was just really surprised. I thought they were quite a few years younger than that. And also a lot of the references they make, like they make references to Tumblr, and I don't think teenagers still use Tumblr. And there were quite a few references like that I think just weren't quite right for the age group that she was writing about. But in saying that, I still think this is a really great middle grade book that deals with some things that we don't see depicted often enough in middle grade fiction. I also read Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. This was another one of those books that my friend Vic got for me. I have done a reading vlog where I talk about reading all of the books that she got me, but that will be coming soon. As I said, it felt weird to upload that and not acknowledge everything that's going on. But this is another middle grade book. It is also about a young girl going to a new school for the first time. She had previously been homeschooled, and this is her first time in like a mainstream school, and she doesn't really know how to conduct herself. She doesn't really understand a lot of social norms. For example, she's always carrying around her ukulele and singing to people on their birthdays. She has a pet rat that she takes to school with her. She's just seen as a bit of an outcast and a bit unusual. But for our main character, a young boy, he can't help but find himself drawn to her. It's about him figuring out why he's reluctant to pursue any kind of friendship or even romance with this girl, for his fear of being judged by his peers. I didn't love this book. I found it slightly odd and strange. But I think my reaction to this book is actually the reaction that a lot of the students have to Stargirl. Oh yeah, she doesn't go by her normal name, she calls herself Stargirl. Ultimately, it's a book about not caring what other people think and being yourself. So I think the messaging of this book is really great. I just don't know how much I loved the story. I also read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is the second novel that I have read from this author. I read With the Fire on High earlier this year and I really enjoyed it, and I liked this one even more. This is a YA book that is told in verse and has alternating perspectives between two teenage girls who have the same father, but they don't know that they have the same father. They only find this out after his death, when he dies in a plane crash. One of the girls lives in the United States, one of the girls lives in Dominican Republic. They didn't know that each other existed. Their father was living a complete double life that neither of them knew about, and it's about them coming to terms with that alongside grieving for their father and building a connection between each other as sisters, understanding each other while harbouring a level of resentment for one another. I love this author's writing. I think she just has a way of putting such poignant things into so few words. One of the criticisms I've heard of this book is that for the most part these girls aren't together. It is the lead up to them coming together. It's the lead up to them finding out about one another, and you're just predominantly following their journey of grief after the loss of their father. That was something I connected to on a very personal level, and I think that's why I feel so much love for this book, is because it tapped into some of my own personal emotions. I still haven't read her first novel, The Poet X, but I would really love to, and I think she is just going to be an auto-buy author for me now. Now moving on to the fiction for grown-ups. I read Come Again by Robert Webb. You may know Robert Webb from his memoir, How to Be a Boy, which I absolutely loved. I think it's one of the best non-fiction books I've read around masculinity. Or you may know him from his TV work on shows like Peep Show. Come Again is his fiction debut, and it tells the story of Kate, who is coming to terms with the grief that she experienced after her husband died suddenly. Her life is sort of falling apart. She doesn't really have any structure. She's not taking care of herself. She is not performing well at her job. And one day she wakes up in a body and a bedroom that she doesn't recognize as her own, until she realizes she has been transported back to when she was 18 years old. She's in her university hall's room, and it is the first day that she met her husband 28 years ago. She is still herself with all of these memories of her marriage to her husband, their entire lives together. She's just back when she was 18, and she is determined to save her husband because the reason that he died was because of a tumour that went undetected for decades. I had really high hopes for this book and I thought I was really gonna love it, but unfortunately it fell a little flat for me. I felt like a lot of the time the author was using this book as a vehicle for his opinions, and while I would say I agreed with like 85% of his opinions, they were very kind of heavy-handed. These characters didn't feel real to me because they weren't real people. They were people that existed to make a point. Also, the last quarter of the novel was just kind of weird, and it felt like it was a completely different novel altogether. It's safe to say I wasn't a huge fan of this one, unfortunately. Let's get all of the disappointing ones out of the way, shall we? I read Kismet by Luke Tredget. Again, this is one that I had really high expectations about. This was blurbed as being Black Mirror meets Bridget Jones, and that's what really drew me to this book. I was like, box ticking everywhere, but I guess when you make a comparison like that, you're just setting the bar too high. This is about Anna, who is on the brink of her 30th birthday, and it's about her relationship with her career and her relationship with her long-term boyfriend and how she's feeling quite dissatisfied with those things. She decides to sign up to this dating app called Kismet, which analyzes every single thing that you do on the internet and gives you a compatibility rating with the people that you pass by. Premise, loving it. But again, it felt like the characters in this book were just existing to kind of make a point. And it wasn't a point that was particularly subtly done. Anna is a really irritating character, and I don't think all characters need to be likable or even invoke sympathy in the reader. But if they're not likable, they at least need to be compelling, and I don't think Anna was. It wasn't enough like Black Mirror, and it wasn't enough like Bridget Jones. So unfortunately, another one where I preferred the premise to the actual execution. Next I have The House of Silk by Anthony Horowitz. This was another book that Vic picked out for me to read, and I'm so glad that I finally experienced some of Anthony Horowitz's writing, because I never really felt like his books were for me, but I know he is so beloved by so many readers. This is a Sherlock Holmes retelling, and it is basically just Sherlock Holmes fanfiction, you know, that's what it is. It's quite a bit longer than your average Sherlock story that you would get from Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't think it's doing anything particularly new if these characters are new with the story, which is what I kind of want when it comes to a Sherlock retelling, but in saying that, it gave me everything that I want when I read Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock stories. It felt familiar. I felt like I really knew these characters well. He's really managed to replicate the atmosphere and tone of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and that is really, really impressive. What I will say is that one of the characters in this book has a scar, and that is used as shorthand for them being a villain, which is not something that I appreciate in books or any form of media or entertainment, etc. So do be aware of that going into this book, but if you like the Sherlock stories, you'll like this. In May, I also read Weather by Jenny Offel, which is shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. This is a novel that doesn't have a huge amount of plot, which isn't something that really bothers me. I'm much more interested in character, and we spend this whole book inside the head of one character. It's like we're a fly on the wall in Lizzie's head. Lizzie is a librarian, she's a mother, she's a wife, she is a sister to someone who's trying to get clean. This book doesn't necessarily have a chain of events like a plot would, it's just jumping around with a lot of her thoughts and observations about the world. And a lot of these observations are poignant and even poetic at moments. It's definitely a novel that reflects when it was written. It's a very contemporary novel. A lot of the musings in this book are around things like the rise of right-wing politics and about climate change. The little snippets into Lizzie's thought processes wasn't my favourite way to experience a story, but I can definitely see the talent in how Jenny Offel has shown Lizzie's thoughts to us. I did listen to this one on audiobook, and I do wonder if I would have had a better experience reading it physically so I could properly devote some attention to some of those lines that struck me. If you do like reading books that are very much of this moment, then I think you would really appreciate this one. Another novel that is very much of this moment is Summer Water by Sarah Moss. This book is set on the longest day of summer, and it follows 12 different characters who are cooped up in a faded Scottish cabin park, and while it's the longest day of summer, it is also lashing rain. So they are just stuck with their families in this really isolated place. We follow these characters as they are dealing with their own thoughts and problems, but also watching everyone else and telling us what their thoughts are on the people in this very odd community that they find themselves in. And this is ultimately leading up to a tragedy. In many ways, this reads like a short story collection, and I think you could experience each of these stories as their individual tales, but when you weave them together, it paints a really interesting portrait. It really reflects a lot of the tensions and prejudice that you can find in contemporary British society, particularly with regards to othering people, with regards to Brexit. I underlined so many things in this book, so I do wonder if I would have had a better reading experience with Weather had I been able to do the same like I was with this book. But another thing I do want to mention about this book is the sex scene that's in this book. It's phenomenal, it's so great. It brilliantly depicts someone who is very much caught up in their own head when they should be experiencing something pleasurable. It's showing all of their thoughts pinging off in their head, and they're not able to just enjoy the moment, and I really loved that. All of the books I've read by Sarah Moss I've given 5 stars to. I just think she is incredible. I also read Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This is a really quiet novel, but so interesting. This is a novel that is translated from Japanese, and it follows 36-year-old Kiko and how she struggles to kind of fit in with the society around her, but she's not exactly bothered by that. It's just everyone else around her that's bothered. She has worked in a convenience store for 18 years and she has no desire or plan to leave. She likes feeling valued as a worker there. She knows what she's doing. But everyone around her is really judgmental. Her family think there's something essentially wrong with her. Her colleagues don't understand why she's worked at a convenience store for so long. And really, this book is just unpicking societal expectations. I think there's a lot of pressure to have a certain kind of life, to have the amazing career. There's not an awful lot of recognition that you can be just happy as you are. It really interrogates what we consider normal and why we consider it normal, and what happens to people when they don't fit that mold. I didn't always love the writing style in this book, I guess because the main character is a little bit awkward. Sometimes the writing can feel a little bit awkward, but I think it raised a lot of ideas that I found really interesting. I also read The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. This is the final book that I'm going to talk about that my friend Vic picked out for me. This is the second book I've read from Beth O'Leary, but this is actually her debut. I read her second book last month. This book follows Tiffy and Leon, who enter into a flat share together, where they are not only sharing a flat, but they are sharing a bed, but they are not supposed to meet. Tiffy works in the publishing industry, which was an aspect of this book that I did enjoy and gave me a few laughs. Whereas Leon works for the NHS, he works for the National Health Service, and he mainly does night shifts, so they never see each other. Their paths are never meant to cross. They only communicate using post-it notes that they leave in the flat for one another, and through these post-it notes they start to get to know each other. You do have to just kind of suspend your disbelief a little bit with regards to that and just enjoy it for what it is and appreciate the growing romance and sexual tension between these two characters. But aside from the romance, there's also a lot of other interesting things going on in this book. For example, Leon's brother is in prison for a crime that he didn't commit, and Tiffy has just got out of an emotionally abusive relationship, and that was something that I felt a real personal connection to, and I really appreciated and was impressed by how well Beth O'Leary handled that aspect of the story. Another writer who I'm just going to want to read all of their books for the rest of forever. The final contemporary fiction book I have to talk about is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. This book is phenomenal. This is one of my favourite books that I've read so far this year. In this book we follow 25-year-old Amira, who is a babysitter, and one night when the white family that she babysits for contact her and ask her to take the child out of the house, Amira is apprehended and accused of kidnapping this child. This sets off an explosive chain of events, and Amira's employer Alex, who is like a feminist blogger, has the best of intentions to make things right, but she really doesn't. This book is predominantly to do with the dynamics of privilege, and Alex is a prime example of a really self-serving white feminist. I thought the characters in this book were exceptionally crafted. They really felt like real people with complexities and nuances. No one in this book is a fully bad guy, but they're certainly not entirely well-intentioned. Amira is a character that you really root for, that you really want what's best for. I'm just so impressed with this book. I would recommend it to basically anyone. I think it's just such a great book. I read one classic in May, that was The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. New favourite classics writer, definitely. I buddy read this with Katie from Books and Things, and it was a really great experience reading this one with her. This was first published in 1905 and it is set in New York, and it follows our main character Lily Bart as she navigates her quite interesting social circles and social circumstances. Lily is beautiful and charming, and she really likes the finer things in life, but she can't enjoy those if she hasn't got any money. The only way that she can get money is by getting a husband. This book is basically an analysis of gender and marriage in this time period. It explores how women were kind of screwed either way. You don't have any personal freedom as a single woman because you don't have financial security, but then if you get married, you don't have personal freedom because you have to answer to your husband. I think a lot of the sexism that Lily experiences in this book would still be relevant to a contemporary audience, unfortunately. Lily is a really interesting and fascinating character, and now that I talk about these books close together, I feel like if Lily existed in the 21st century, she might be Alex from this book. Although I definitely rooted for Lily a lot more than I would Alex. I would be really keen to read some more Edith Wharton. This was the first book that I'd read from her, and I know she has a few other novels as well, so I would be really intrigued to read some more of her work. And finally, I have a non-fiction book to talk to you guys about. This is Red Dust Road by Jackie Kay. This is Jackie Kay's memoir, and she is a poet that I really love, so I was very keen to read her memoir. This is mainly about her journey of coming into contact with her biological parents. When she was very young, she was adopted by a white family in the Scottish Highlands. Before reading this, I thought both of her biological parents were Nigerian. That's not the case. Her mother is white Scottish and her father is Nigerian. The memoir is told in a non-linear way, and because Jackie Kay is just such a superb writer, her memoir reads as if it's fiction, like it reads like it's a novel. We follow her as she confronts who she is and who her biological parents are, and we see her disappointment and her coming to terms with that. I was obviously really interested in this because I'm such a big fan of her work anyway, but because this does read like fiction, I don't think you need to be like a big fan of Jackie Kay to appreciate this memoir. I read this in just a couple of sittings. It's really readable, it's really captivating, and I would highly recommend it. So there we have it. These are the books that I read in May. I think it was a really great reading month. Even though I didn't love everything that I read, there are definitely some in this stack that are new favourites. I really loved them. Do leave me a comment down below and let me know what your favourite book that you read in May was, or what you're currently reading, and I would really encourage you to check out some of the links that I've left in the description that I mentioned at the start of this video if you haven't done so already. I hope you are keeping well, I hope you are taking care of yourself and you're safe, and I will talk to you in my next video.